We are continuing with our look at the annual Torah portion. The portion for this week is Behaalotcha. Behaalotcha, which is when thou lightest. The verses are Numbers chapter 8, verse 1, all the way up through 12 and 16. Numbers 8, verse 1, all the way up to 12 and 16. When we look at this particular portion, there's many things that it discusses from the title, which is Behaalotcha. It gives the instructions for the lighting of the menorah. It also goes through talking about the Levites and how the Levites were chosen instead of the firstborn, which is interesting. It deals in these beginning verses with the length of service for the Levites, which was age 25 up through 50. And what I wanted to talk about here briefly in Numbers chapter 9, dealing with a discussing of Passover, Pesach. So I want to go over to Numbers. Let's look at Numbers Bamidbar, chapter 9, and then we'll read Numbers 9, 1 through 14. Numbers 9, verse 1. Here, let me put this up on the screen here. All the way down to verse 14.
It says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the first new moon of the second year after they had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, saying, Now let the children of Israel perform the Pesach at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this new moon between the evenings, perform it at its appointed time. According to all its laws and right rulings, you perform it." And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel to perform the Pesach. So they performed the Pesach on the 14th day of the first new moon between the evenings in the wilderness of Sinai. According to all that Yahweh commanded Moshe, so the children of Israel did. But there were men who were defiled for a being of a moon, so that they were not able to perform the Pesach on that day. So they came before Moshe and Aaron that day, and those men said to them, "We are defiled for the being of a man. Why are we withheld from bringing near the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time among the children of Israel?" And Moshe said to them, "Wait, let me hear what Yahweh commands concerning you." And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, When any man of you or your generation is unclean for a being, or is far away on a journey, he shall still perform the Pesach of Yahweh. On the 14th day of the second new moon, between the evenings, they perform it. With unleavened bread and bitter herbs they eat it. They do not leave of it until morning, and they do not break a bone of it. According to all the laws of the Pesach, they perform it. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey, and has failed to perform the Pesach, that same being shall be cut off from among his people, because he did not bring the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time. That man bears his sin. And when a stranger sojourns among you, then he shall perform the Pesach of Yahweh. You shall do so according to the law of the Pesach and according to its right ruling. You have one law, both for the stranger and the native of the land.
Okay, very good. So we look over here, a few things we want to talk about as it relates to the Pesach. It's interesting that, um, you know, from a principle standpoint, in terms of understanding things like Pesach or, any of the laws, statutes, and commands, we have to be able to understand that when we see these differences that people have as it relates to Passover, not your calendar, because there's so many different calendars, but when we talk about just the idea of keeping Pesach on the first month, on the 14th day of the month, right? Many different people want to say when they think the first month is. That's not the point. But once you've done that, and once you've found the first month, however it is that you find it, on the 14th day of that month, between the evenings, perform it, the Pesach. And so, Torah, which is the law, Torah, which is the instructions, Torah is the thing that we look to establish a thing. If we want to establish a thing, we go to the Torah and we're able to find what that thing is and understand timing, when to do it, how to do it. And so we've seen, and another thing, Torah doesn't go against itself. Torah maybe at times will show you various sides to a particular thing, but we're dealing with the one particular thing. And so when we see something that we find in scripture, Torah I'm referring to, and we see something else like here, this doesn't take away from what we've already learned about Pesach in Exodus when it's given, right? This doesn't take away from those things, but what it does do is add to it, right? Because these people who had a situation, somehow they came in contact with, they were defiled by assault. What's that? How's it read in the King James? I feel like someone was dead or something. They touched a dead body or something. They were defiled by a soul.
Yeah, it says, and there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of them.
Oh, that's what it says in King James. Okay, very good. And so these people who wanted to do what was right, but was unable to do what was right because when we look at, it's interesting, when we look at Pesach, it don't talk about, well, if you're unclean, you can't keep Pesach. But what it do talk about is if you're unclean, you have to be somewhere else, not with everyone else. And so in the event that you was unclean, you had to go and be somewhere else, and you couldn't be where you were supposed to be with everyone else with keeping the Passover. And so we see over here, interesting addendum, an addendum to the scriptures, where it's given the second Passover. Now, this just caused me to think about something. When you think about these types of things where we have these additions to, quote unquote, I mean, it's addition to, it's an addendum in the original giving of Pesach. You know, it says what it says. It don't talk about it, what happened if you miss it in the first giving of it. But here, as life happens, the Most High, and Moshe, by the way, he don't really plead the people's case. He takes the issue before the Most High, and the Most High tells him what to do, which just so happens to be something that gives grace to these people who probably, I mean, anything could have happened. But it seems as if the way that it's written, that they just so happen to be in contact with this, you know, person that defiled them, the soul, and then this happens. And so a couple things that it caused me to think about. Firstly, the importance of Pesach. Because why couldn't it just been like, well, you missed it this time? Yeah, it's no big deal. You missed it this time, you can catch the next one if you make it that far. Right? Why did it have to be such a thing where a provision had to be made so that they could still memorialize Pesach? Why was it so important that the Most High said, okay, I understand your issue, and being that this is the Pesach, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, if a situation like this arises, don't worry, we'll make room for a second Pesach. And so why is this such a thing that is so important that you know was offered? Nobody wants to say anything. You know, we have these little section over here, this little comment section. Any one of you persons, if you had any thoughts about why you thought Pesach was so important that this provision had to be given, go ahead and drop that over in the. Oh well, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, well, at Passover, we do the communion, the third cup of the Seder, which is the memorial cup, and also remembering, of course, the work of the Messiah, but at this time it's remembering the Exodus from Egypt and the fact that they made the Most High their king.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that yes, these are good answers. I think, and they're correct. When you think about the significance, the importance of Pesach, Pesach really is the beginning it's the birth of the nation. Pesach is. Israel, even though they were promised, they were a chosen generation all the way back from Abraham. At the time when the Pesach happened, they literally belonged to another. They were the literal property of Pharaoh. And so Pesach is that time of transition where Israel literally becomes the people of Yahweh. And so this time is a significance its significance is great because it's the beginning of the people. It signifies the beginning of the people, the beginning of Yahweh being the Elohim of the people, Israel. And, it in that regards, it holds great significance. Now, when you enter in the idea of its messianic significance, then now that elevates it even more, because you're thinking about the fact that this thing that the Most High did for the literal people of Israel, he also was pointing towards what he would do in the future, what he would make available, and what was prophesied from the very beginning of time, and what would take place in the context of Pesach, of Passover, and what would take place in the future for the redemption of Israel and mankind.
Oh yeah.
And so Pesach represents that initial salvation for both physical Israel out of Egypt, and the thing that literally happened, that points to the new covenant and what it is that Messiah does all at the same time. And so this day has great weight attached to it, and we can see that by the way that the Most High makes provision for those who aren't able to keep it. Now, another thing that I think is interesting when we look at verse 13, the man who is clean and the one who's not on a journey, and if he fails to perform Pesach, he's cut off. If you ain't got a legitimate excuse for not keeping Pesach, you're cut off. You can have an excused absence. Excused absences are perfect. They're legitimized in the Torah, an excused absence. And he says what those what the different things might be. Right? But the one who's clean and he's not on a journey, that one who fails to perform Pesach, he's cut off. And so again, this thing is so important. It says that man bears his sin. Is interesting. It's interesting because when you think about this idea of being cut off, it literally could be cut off from living. But it also could mean just, cut off from all communications, as if they're cut off from the living. As far as someone else is concerned, like not the individual themselves, because they're if they're dead, that's one thing. They're dead, right? But if they're alive but not in connection with the nation, and the people, the nation, are treating that one as if they were dead, from their perspective, there's no difference, because there's no longer any connection, communication, whatever with those individuals. But this thing is so serious. It's so serious that is the penalty. I thought that was interesting. And so lastly, when we look at 14, This was a read verse 14 again.
Verse 14. And when a stranger sojourns among you, then he shall perform the Pesach of Yahweh. He shall do so according to the law of the Pesach and according to its right ruling. You have one law, both for the stranger and for the native of the land.
Okay, so when we look at this one, right, it's saying that if there's somebody with you while you keeping Pesach, they supposed to keep it with you, right? They supposed to keep it with you, however they are. They supposed to keep it with you, right? No, that's not right.
Well, you mean like not just like a person who just comes over to the house that day.
Well, it says if when a
person-
stranger sojourns among you,
Yeah, they
He'll keep it
actually
too.
Are part of the kahal, the kahila, the kahal, the kahilat, the group, community,
yes, they have to have been made apart.
made a part, initiated.
They have to have been made apart. And so if we thought that when we look at Numbers chapter 9 and verse 14, that, you know, Pesach, if we're keeping Pesach and someone comes over, or we even invite someone to have it with us, that this verse is saying that, you know, if they're there while you're keeping it, they keep it too with you. But the key over here is that it says he shall do so. He'll keep it according to the law of Pesach, which isn't here. It isn't listed here. And according to its right rulings. You see? And so something has already been previously established that it's referring back to. It's not just saying everybody supposed to keep it. It's saying that there's specific stipulations that aren't mentioned right here, but you're supposed to refer back. There's like a footnote right there. Refer back to what was previously stated. That's what it says. He shall do according to the law of Pesach. But what's the law of Pesach? Well, we got to go back. We got to go back in order to see that.
I mean, there has to be some way of governing yourself and governing the whole. It's an order of service. It's not just thrown together. It's not just we're at a park and everybody can come and partake of.
Coming to you.
There's a certain way that you have to come to Passover.
Yes.
We deal with that here, but in the New Testament, it gets even deeper to the spiritual levels. But
right, but we can't understand the spiritual levels unless we first understand the principle that's given forth from a physical standpoint. The reason why we're able to understand it from a New Testament standpoint is that we have this foundation established for us here. And so if we look at Exodus chapter 12, which actually is, it says right there, this is the law of the Pesach. It says it right there. And so we remember back in Numbers, it says for you to refer back, he shall do so according to the law of the Pesach. Guess what? This right here is the law of the Pesach. Read 43 down to 49.
It says, it is a night of watches. Oh, that's 42. 43. And Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron, this is the law of the Pesach. No son of a stranger is to eat of it.
Oh, wait a second. No son of the stranger shall eat of it, it said. But over there it said the stranger that sojourns among you. But over here it said, no son of the stranger shall eat of it. Okay, keep on going.
But any servant a man has bought for silver, when you have circumcised him.
When you have circumcised him, it says. Go ahead.
Then let him eat of it.
Then he can eat. Okay, so there's some stipulations. It says anybody just hanging out with you necessarily ain't doing it. but somebody who has a real connection to you and who have dedicated to themselves to the ways of the Most High. That's what they did when they circumcised them. That one can do it.
Mhm.
Look what it's saying, 45. What do
A
45 say?
sojourner and a hired servant does not eat of it.
That one don't eat of it. So you could be somebody that sojourns, and you could be somebody who's a hired servant of Israel, but you don't eat the Passover, even though you be with them all the time. You like family adjacent.
I don't know. I never heard that.
What?
I don't know. Family adjacent.
Yeah, because it's not real family, but you kind of like next to the family. You see? That's what adjacent. You know that from.
I know what adjacent means.
Yeah.
But I'm saying
It's the same.
I
It's
never
the
heard
same.
that phrase.
I might have just coined it just now, but adjacent is something that we do. Like some people, they like hood adjacent.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
or they say they're in this part of the family, but they're not part of the family.
Yeah. So they're just yes. Right. So they're just adjacent, right? And so this person here, this sojourner and this hired servant, he hangs out with them. He's going along with them. He's not part of them, but he moves along with them. Or this hired servant, this person who he gets paid to do what he does with them all the time. And so when we think back over to Numbers 9 and 14, it says, when a stranger sojourns among you, there got to be like a little footnote, because we got to understand what that means when a stranger sojourns among you. But it's okay, because it says then he shall perform the Pesach of Yahweh, and he'll do it according to the law of Pesach, which is back over here. So it's not just any old sojourner. It's one who is committed and has committed themselves to the covenant of the Most High. Right? Because it said he's circumcised. He's circumcised. He has the sign of the covenant. Right? Okay, 46.
46. It is eaten in one house. You are not to take any of the flesh outside the house, nor are you to break any bone of it. All the congregation of Israel are to perform it. And when a stranger sojourns with you and shall perform the Pesach to Yahweh, let all his males be circumcised, and let him come near and perform it, and he shall be as a native of the land. But let no uncircumcised eat of it.
Let no uncircumcised eat of it. So all the people who's partaking in the Pesach are participating fully as one of Israel. They're meeting all of the qualifications of being a part of the nation, out, as much as they could be outside of, being blood relative. But because of this mark of the covenant that they placed on themselves, they're able to partake. And so just read 49 right there. That's what we read to anyway.
There is one Torah for the native born and for the stranger who sojourns among you.
Okay, very good. So when we talk about Pesach, this most important set apart time that the Most High has created. And again, when we think about it in regards to what it says over in Numbers chapter 9, where it's revisiting it, it helps us to see the importance of it. It helps us to see the significance of it. It helps us to understand that it's pointing back to, the the redemptive qualities that exist inside of it, and how it is really a symbol of the initial salvation of the people. And it's so important, if you happen to miss it, then there are provisions made for you to partake in it a month later, which only points to the great significance of the day. And so when we think about the fact that all of this is done for Pesach, it helps us to think about its messianic qualities, and the things that point us to Messiah and his importance. And it's no coincidence that when Yeshua dies, he dies in the context of Passover. There's no coincidence that when he becomes the sacrifice for the sins of the world, that it's in the context of Passover. That there's no makeups for any other feasts. There's no makeups. Like, if you miss it, you just miss it. And then, by the way, if you keep the second Passover, it's not like your whole year gets shifted forward, right? It's still the second month, right? It's not like you shift forward and then now you're keeping all the feasts a month later, right?
That means you don't keep the whole unleavened bread diet.
No. It's the Pesach. Yes, it's just the Pesach. And so when we look at this, that's why I wanted to kind of talk about it just a little bit, because when we think about the significance and the great importance of Pesach, there's so many things that point us towards something greater, which in this case is Yeshua.